It would be my pleasure. Honestly, I might have to make this into a series because I thought of over 50 examples. There's really an embarrassment of riches when it comes to good adaptations, whether movies or TV, and there's a lot of good stuff to talk about. Given that, it's really just how do we want to talk about it? Do we want to break it up by genre, fiction versus nonfiction, adaptations that were as good as the book, adaptations that were better than the book, adaptations that did something completely different than the book, but it succeeded really well? I mean, it's just like, what are you looking for? So there's a lot to talk about. I'm just going to give a couple examples of ones that I really like, and we can go from there. Since I mentioned Ben Affleck in my last video, The Town, Gone Baby Gone, and even Argo, honestly, are all really great movies, and they all came from other source material. The Town's probably my personal favorite in that bucket. There's The Social Network, one of the greatest movies in the last decade. David Fincher came from the Accidental Billionaires book. If you want to look at other nonfiction, we have Moneyball, The Big Short, Catch Me If You Can, a Spielberg classic. You got Arrival, that came from a short story collection, was, one of my favorite movies that year. You want something romantic? How about Pride and Prejudice or Atonement? Joe Wright's killing it with those. Queen's Gambit, one of my favorite shows from last year. Absolutely stellar book. Maybe the show is even better. It was so good. Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I know that's a comic. It's still what we're talking about. That movie, great. Takes the source material and turns it into something even more magical and beautiful. Auteur stuff, you got Jackie Brown from Quentin Tarantino. You have The Prestige from Christopher Nolan. I mean, you can pick your poison there. There Will Be Blood, Paul Thomas Anderson. All that stuff is great. You can make a whole meal out of Philip K. Dick stories, so Blade Runner, Minority Report, another Spielberg classic. Total Recall, A Scanner Darkly was also really cool. I didn't personally watch The Man in the High Castle. That book was just kind of okay for me. But there's just so much good stuff. I haven't read Jaws or The Godfather personally, but the word on the street is those movies are way better than the books, and it's almost impossible for them not to be. Those are some of the greatest American movies ever made. So we just have so much good stuff. So I know a lot of people say that the books are always better than the movies. I think when you really look at it, that's not true. I think the bad ones tend to stick in our minds, and the great adaptations are so good that they end up having a life of their own completely apart from the books, which is maybe why we don't associate them in the same way. But anyway, those are my thoughts. What are yours?